Hi everyone, welcome back. This is Teri. Today we're going to go dive in a little deeper into a subject I have broached, but I haven't really gone in depth on. One of my friends that is in the YouTube biker community, Bry the Biker, did a video that I watched last night on raising a child with autism. I knew that Bry and I had a lot of the same parallels with depression and different mental health issues in our lives. But this is the first time I knew he had an autistic child as well. And then he mentioned another writer, Big Smitty Riding, who also has a son that has autism. It's a hard topic. When my son was born, he was my fourth baby. We were in the birthing room when he was born. He was born to a 15-year-old mom whose mental illnesses had not yet developed because of her age. As soon as Joshua was born, as soon as they handed him to me, I knew immediately something was different. I didn't know what it was, but I knew something was different. The day came to take Joshua home, and things just were different. And Joshua was born in '93, and this was before routine screening of autism was done. I took him to the doctor time after time after time, and I was told varying things. Some of the first things that we noticed were things like sensory problems. Joshua would start to scream if anyone sang to him. Joshua could not be left without being what we called in a burrito wrap. He was tightly wrapped where his arms and his legs had no movement. If his blanket was loose, he screamed. So, there were things that we knew, we could see, but we didn't know what was going on. I didn't know a lot about autism. Back in '93, it wasn't really, it wasn't a topic anyone really discussed unless it was extremely severe. And we weren't given any signs. And when I look back, Joshua would take his bottle until he threw up. He had no gauge as to stop him from taking his formula. As he grew, I still couldn't put him on the ground. He spent the first 2 years of his life pretty much on a backpack on my back or swaddled in front of me 24/7. Well, not 24/7. I have to take that back. We had really 3 shifts. I would take a shift, his dad would take a shift, and his oldest sister would take a shift. That way we all got rest, and he was attended to 24/7. He took naps for about 5 minutes a day. I remember looking forward to the time he would go to sleep, and then when he did in the evening, dreading knowing when he would wake up, and the day would just blur one day into another of not knowing what was happening with my son. I took him, as I said, from doctor to doctor. One of the first doctors said, well, if you don't want him, I'll take him. I'm glad I wasn't a first-time mom, because I think that would have done so much damage. I can't even imagine the damage that would have done to a first-time mother, a first-time parent, hearing that from a pediatrician. Took him to other doctors as he grew, and we were told he was too smart for us, that we needed parenting classes, that he was placed in the wrong home, things of that nature. They were focusing more on our parenting skills or what they thought lack of instead of the problems I was telling them. I was telling them things like, he won't make eye contact. And we had a thing when we spoke with our children, we expected them to look us in the eye. Joshua wouldn't do that, and I didn't know why. When he grew out of the backpack and he began to be able to be on the ground, I still had to make sure his clothes were very tightly fitted on him, had no tags. At that time, I didn't know that was a sign. And as he grew, I would watch him. This was back when we had VHS tapes. He would take all of the tapes and he would line them up in a big line. Then he had to eat with a special fork. He called it his Batman fork. I couldn't see any difference. Joshua did. If he did not get that fork, it was the end of the world to him. So it was it was constantly trying to figure out what was going on. When he was 7 years old, one of the kids came up to me and said, I read an article about a disorder called sensory integration dysfunction, and it fit Joshua perfectly. For the first time, every box was ticked off. That was my son. I made an appointment with the university here, Oregon Health Science University, and he went in for a team evaluation. I explained what was going on, what we thought was happening, and it was a very long, very grueling test. And I was, a little worried to take Joshua. I mean, we didn't take him in public. Our kids were expected to behave, and Joshua he couldn't do it. Something was just different. I remember the testing. In one part, they brought me behind it was in a hallway, and I could see into the room where Joshua was being tested, and there was a woman asking him questions, like she would show him pictures. What is this, Joshua? It's a hat. What is this, Joshua? A dog. By about the fourth question, I could see he was getting irritated, and I was like, oh my gosh, we're going to have a problem. She asked the question, what is this, Joshua? And he looked at the picture, and he looked at her. I stopped breathing. I didn't know what was going to happen. And he said, you don't know very much, do you? I was like, whew, escaped that one. And that was an icebreaker. That was just really funny. Joshua was very verbal. He had always been very verbal. We just couldn't figure out what was going on, and it seemed no one wanted to help us. I remember they took him into a room at the end of the testing that it lasted for hours. I cannot remember now. It's been so long ago if it was all the testing was done in one day, if it was done in several days. But what I do remember is the final team meeting. I was there alone with all of these doctors. They came in, they sat down, and everyone looked really serious, and I didn't know what to expect. And the leader of the team said, yes, he does have sensory integration dysfunction. And in those seconds, I should say, that they said he has sensory integration dysfunction, I felt tremendous relief, because finally we had a name. We had an answer. And then they led up to, or I should say they proceeded with, but for your son, it falls under the category of the autism spectrum. When I heard that, the effect on me was, I was stunned. I felt as if I had been kicked in the gut. I had not known any children with autism except ones that were extremely on the low functioning end of the spectrum. And Joshua was very high functioning. But when they said that to me, I couldn't breathe. And I remember asking them, are you telling me my son has no future? And I really don't remember what they said after that. I got in the car and I called a friend of mine who had 2 children that had very, very severe autism. And I told her what I had been told. And she spoke to me on the way home and gave me resources, some places to check. And as he got a little older, we had some situations that at the time we didn't really take that seriously. I mean, they were serious, but we didn't realize how they would grow. We didn't realize that autistic rage is a very real thing. An autistic meltdown with a neurodivergent, I guess is the term now, child, is very real. It's very scary, and you cannot stop it. Joshua was at the point to where when he was told no, he would attack. His dad and I had gone out for dinner one evening, and my daughter and son were watching him, and it was about 11 o'clock at night, and he wanted to go out front and play. And I think he was about 4 years old at that time, and he was told no. And he attacked my daughter. We've never seen that before. And it was with such rage and such force that he pulled out clumps of hair from her head. That was that was frightening. And as he grew, it got worse. When he started school, I remember calling the teachers and forewarning them. I homeschooled all of my children except for Joshua. And I spoke with the teachers and said, now look, this is what we're experiencing, and I want you to be aware of it. When I picked him up that first day of kindergarten, they said he was so delightful. He was so funny and so sweet and so inquisitive, which very much is the part of my son that everyone loves. He is sweet and he is kind and he is genuine and he's loving and he's giving. But when he's in the shell of autism, everything is tainted. I remember he would take bicycles apart. He would take everything apart. Radios, bicycles. He wanted to build things. He loved being with my dad in the shop, anything mechanical. And then he became obsessed with writing music and singing, guitars. He was self-taught on the guitar. I apologize. I will put a link in the description box to his album. And I do ask that you don't purchase it because I don't know where the money is going. It's not going to my son. I'm trying to work with Reverb and get it figured out so that the money can go to him. But it will show you the talent that this child has. When he was very, very difficult to raise, and there were times, the police knew us very well. He attacked everyone in the house, and it could be for nothing, that we saw. But to Joshua, it was something. It could have been there was too much background noise. It could have been because he didn't have the right fork. It could have been because someone was sitting in his seat that he thought they shouldn't be there. We never really knew when these things would happen. When they did, they were with a force. He became very, very dangerous. We were at the hospital many times, and people just didn't have an understanding. A lot of people would think, oh, your son is just a brat. Or if they saw the part of him that is the true Joshua, they saw the most wonderful, sweet, genuine, kind boy that laughed at just a moment's notice. And looking back on it and feeling the dread that I had every day, because every day with him was a fight. It was a struggle. And I had nowhere to turn. I had him in therapy. They were telling me it was just ADHD and to put him on one medication. That medication made him extremely violent to where he actually tried to take our lives at times. So the police, the hospitals knew us very, very well. My only regret as a parent is not treasuring these moments with him and being worn out by having to play this mental chess game with him on a daily basis and knowing he's on the street now. I would take those days back in a heartbeat if I could. And I would cherish every bit of it. He was a wonderful baker. He was just an amazing, amazing kid. There was something a lot more going on than just autism with Joshua, but autism was the main component. And when I see him today on the street, many of you know that have been here a while, you know that I really struggle with him being on the street, and I try to find him, I try to look for Joshua. It's heartbreaking because as a mom, you want to fix everything, and autism is certainly not anything that you can fix. I do firmly believe had we gotten an accurate diagnosis when he was much younger, we could have intervened and maybe the outcome would have been different. Maybe Joshua would be living a very healthy, productive life. It's a life I would not wish on anyone, but then again, knowing what the problem was, really, it helped. It helped. It was challenging. It was difficult. Typical people didn't get what we were going through. I remember when we would send him to school and we had to have, he didn't know how to respond when someone would say, "Hi Joshua, how are you today?" And we were trying to coach him on what to say because he would get stuck. And we would say, Joshua, just say, thank you. I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. How are you? Well, it became a very robotic thing with him, and the teachers would comment on Joshua, hello, I'm fine. Thank you for asking. How are you? So we all came together and were able to break that and get him into a much more spontaneous line of thinking. And he was able to communicate quite well. If you didn't know he had autism, you would just think he was one of those kids that something was just a little off, but you wouldn't know what. He was bullied incessantly in school, which outraged me. I kept a very, very documented journal. Every time there was a situation or he came home and somebody had hurt him, I called the school. I wrote down who I spoke with, what time I spoke with, the number I called, everything I could think of, and what had happened. One day, I got a phone call that Joshua had been suspended from school because he had punched someone and knocked them out. And I went up there with my journal and I said, okay, the kid here that was knocked out, for the previous 10 school days, I've called you because this kid has been bullying my son. My son has come home with cuts on his head. He's come home with bruises. He's come home with tales of being thrown into the lockers. This boy went to punch Joshua, and Joshua didn't want to get hit again, and he cold-cocked the kid, and the kid went down. And I remember asking them, so you're going to enforce your no violence policy, but you're not going to enforce your no bullying policy. I suggest you reconsider that. You're supposed to be caring for my son. Here I sit now with my son, about to be 28 years old, living in the streets of Portland. I don't know where he is. And that's the guilt I carry as a parent. I think with all of our kids, we try to do the best we can. We don't always succeed. I can look back and see many failures on my part. But with Joshua, if I could only have those days again to have him here with me under this roof, going to the doctor 3 days a week for therapy, I would take those back. And for parents out there that are feeling alone and overwhelmed, I say to you, reach out. If someone doesn't help you the first time, reach out again. Keep reaching out. Don't feel guilty if you need to take a weekend off. If you don't recharge your batteries, how can you help your child, the one that needs you the most? So take care of yourself and realize many of these kids know they're different. They don't like it. We need to steer them in the way of their talents, things that give them joy. For Joshua, it was baking and it was music. And don't feel, I can't say that. I can't say don't feel alone because it is a very isolating feeling when other parents or professionals or kids don't get your very typical looking child is not the typical child. Don't be afraid to trust your gut. Don't be afraid to get attorneys involved if you have to. Don't be afraid to get educational attorneys involved. One thing I wish I had done, and I did not do it, was get involved with developmental disabilities when he was younger. No, you are not alone. Shine the light on these kids and the wonderful gifts they have to give to society. Support other parents you know that are struggling. Lend an ear. I had a friend that would take Joshua for the afternoon. Take him over to her house, let him play with Legos, do yard work, do anything. And it was so welcomed because it gave us a break. It gave him a break. It gave him something to do. It helped build his confidence. I would also say, don't be afraid to confront doctors when you know in your gut what they're telling you isn't true. You know your child better than anyone. And you are the only one that can advocate for your child. Listen to your gut. Be easy on yourself. Realize this is tough for them. It's tough for us. But if we all stand together and raise the awareness of autism and other mental health issues, we can form a community where we can help each other to help our children. And that, I think, is what our country and our community is all about. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the comment section. Feel free to inbox me. You can get me on Instagram. My email address is in the About Me section. Feel free. Ask anything. If I have knowledge or if I have dealt with a situation and you haven't dealt with it and you don't know what to do, I can help you, or at least I can tell you what I did for my son. Most of my kids have disabilities. Autism is by far the most different animal than any. But be encouraged. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. My son, unfortunately, was afflicted with other mental illnesses as well. But his main one, autism, is one, they're special kids. They're very special kids. The world's confusing to them, and it really doesn't have to be. So let's band together, raise awareness, help each other, and help understand the parent in the store whose child is throwing an absolute tantrum and they're ignoring him. Maybe it's not bad parenting. Maybe it's autism. Don't judge them. Be safe, be courageous, and take joy in the moments you have with your child. One day you will cherish them. I guess that's all for right now. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful week. Until next time, peace.